In the United States, the Federal Bureau of Investigation last month reported that hate crimes in 2020 surged to their highest levels since 2008, with over 7,700 reported incidents. Well, these crimes include attacks targeting Asian Americans. So how can we promote racial equality? Joining us now live from New York is Lara Gregory, founder of the Filipino Americans for Racial Action. Lara, thank you so much for joining us. Filipino Americans for Racial Actions is a voice among many. How can this movement stand out and address anti-Asian hate issues?
First of all, Rico, good evening, and thank you for having me on your program. Yes, it is important, and Filipino Americans for Racial Action is among the first of its kind among Filipino organizations to make a conscious effort of malasakit, to make our voices heard. Now, we are engaging in the issues, not just in terms of being visible, but making sure that Filipino Americans are heard on all levels, particularly on the political level. It's important that Filipino Americans are also perceived as capable of taking leadership in a diverse country like the United States.
Bigotry and marginalization, Lara, is a problem deeply rooted in the system. In your view, how can this be stopped?
It will take a lot of effort and a conscious effort, again, to stop this. We need to address the structures in place. We need to listen to how it's affecting Filipino Americans and Asian Americans in general. For instance, Rico, during the pandemic, a lot of Filipinos were affected, not just because New York was the epicenter of the pandemic, but because Filipino Americans were working as nurses and healthcare workers and are in the front lines. Now, if we are not consciously making an effort for our voices to be heard, to be seen, all the contributions of Filipinos will not be perceived. So we have to amplify our voices, make the contributions heard, and also be seen as directly contributing to the United States.
Lara, I've been to the U.S. Quite a number of times, and across the continent, we have a lot of kababayans. But when you speak to the various Filipino groups from different states, the community, I feel, is fractured. How can you and the Filipino Americans for Racial Action, or FARA, unite everyone to stand up, speak up, and move as one?
One of the things that really give me hope, Rico, is that there is a generational change. Young Filipinos are more engaged, they know the issues, and they are also, in a sense, colorblind. So continuing to engage in conversations, regardless of the differences in opinion, is part of the step. We don't expect people to be all on the same page or to agree or to have just one opinion, but in listening to each other and making room for it. And also, we need to be united based on our Filipino attribute of malasakit. We see Asian Americans, Filipinos in particular, who are getting kicked, who are getting spat on. And that alone should unite us into that common enemy of hatred.
And you mentioned about the acts, no? The acts of violence. Lara, you are a counselor, you are a lawyer, and you've been in the United States now for 20 years. Tell us, from verbal abuse and physical assault, these kinds of violence, when is an act considered a hate crime?
Yes. So hate crimes are traditional offenses. When we say traditional offenses, it can be an assault. And when it is motivated by bias on account of the victim's race, national origin, gender, religious belief, or even just the impression that that particular person is of a particular identity, then that makes it a hate crime. A concrete example of this is what happened to the Filipino woman who was assaulted in Midtown Manhattan, where she was kicked. And while she was getting kicked, she was told, "You do not belong here, go away." Now, that is the legal definition, the concrete example of a hate crime.
And are there a lot of Filipinos who have been victims of hate crimes that have not reported their cases because they're just shrugging it off or they're scared to report it?
I have anecdotal reports directed to me, particularly as a founder of Filipino Americans for Racial Action and also as an attorney. I don't practice criminal law, just want to make it clear, but I am a member of the Advisory Council of the Queen's District Attorney, which handles hate crimes, which is why we are familiar with the definition of hate crimes. So what the reports that I'm getting is that there are many who do not report it, particularly because they don't want to be the subject of revenge, or they just don't want to draw attention to themselves. Some people say that it's part of our culture to not rock the boat. But then what is important is the reporting system. New York City has one of the most robust reporting system here. So anyone who is directly threatened, for physical safety, they can dial 911. Or even if they want to report after, it's not directly a hate crime, but a racial incident, like a racial slur, for instance, they can also report it through 911, the same thing, and they will be directed to either the New York City Commission on Human Rights or the Office of the Prevention for Hate Crimes.
Lara, Gregory, we wish you all the best with this new movement that you have started in New York, Filipino Americans for Racial Action.